Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today is officially the start of spoiler season for Magic the Gathering's Edge of Eternities. Now, that's a little bit misleading, because over the last week or so, we got a metric ton of leaked spoilers for this set, a ton of crazy cards that we've done a number of videos already on the channel discussing, and it's a bunch of cards that I don't think Wizards really wanted us to see yet. And most of those leaked cards aren't even in the debut video today, which is kind of interesting. So if you want to know absolutely everything that I know, everything that is out there in the aether for this set, every single card that has been spoiled so far, definitely check out those videos. I'm going to link a playlist in the description and in the comments. All of the videos I've done so far, all of the official spoilers, and all of the crazy leaks, including a ridiculous rare mega leak that came out last night. Huge video with a ton of rares. All of that stuff's in the playlist. So check out that playlist and check out those videos if you want to get caught up. But today, we're going to go over all of the official spoilers. And even when it comes to the very first official spoilers for the debut of this set, there's so much to go over that I'm going to have to split it up into two videos. So this first video right here is simply going to cover everything that was in the actual debut that Wizards showed us, as well as a few tidbits of extras that I've managed to scrounge up from the internet that I think fits better in this debut coverage video. A few extra arts and a couple of surprises that I'm not going to give away just yet. So this will mainly focus on that. There are still spoilers coming out right now as I'm filming this, so we'll do another video a little bit later tonight where I cover all of the day one spoilers, every single spoiler that they officially announced on day one of spoiler season that wasn't actually a part of the debut. So we're gonna have two videos because there's so many spoilers to cover. I think it makes the most sense. So look forward to that. Check out the leaked videos if you haven't seen those yet, and we're gonna dive right in. Before we do, please like the video. It helps me get the video out to more people and helps the channel grow. And make sure you hit that subscribe button because I'm gonna get these spoilers out to you guys ASAP every day. It is my goal to try to get these videos up and out to you guys before anybody else is able to do it. I'm trying to be the first. I'm not always going to actually succeed at that goal, but it is my goal and I'm going to do my best and I'm going to try and get this stuff out to you ASAP. So let's dive in. We're going to start with some tokens that they showed us. We already knew about the lander mechanic. There's certain cards in this set that create these lander tokens that you can sacrifice to search for a basic land and ramp up. But now we see the actual token here, which is pretty cool. Pay 2 mana, tap it, sack it, search for any basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, and then shuffle. Actually a really good mechanic. I can't wait to see more of the cards that are coming using this. We also saw a sliver token, and this one's really interesting. There is at least one card in this set that creates sliver tokens, and I'm hoping there's actually a ton more that create slivers or are slivers. We're gonna have to wait until we see all of the spoilers before we know for sure, but there is at least one that we're gonna talk about a little bit later in this video, and it's looking really interesting. So can confirm slivers, sliver token is here, 1/1 token creature sliver, and it looks pretty rad. Next up, we've got the official alternate arts for the cycle of Shocklands that are coming back to standard in this set. It's pretty interesting that they're bringing Shocklands back, especially because we have Verges now that can take advantage of them, especially in aggro decks. It's going to be really interesting to see what standard looks like after these Shocklands, but I thought it was at least worth mentioning, showing you guys that we have these alternate arts for these Shocklands, and we've seen all 5 of them now. So we have Breeding Pool, Godless Shrine, Sacred Foundry, Stomping Ground, and Watery Grave. And I think what's cool about these arts is it's supposed to be from the perspective of you being in your spacecraft that just landed on a planet, and you're looking out the window, you're looking out a porthole, and seeing what lies beyond. And I think that's a really cool concept. I like these arts. I like that there's, you know, 2/3 of the top of the card is just literally all art, and they moved the name down to just above the type line. I think they look really cool. But we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Starfighter Pilot. This is one that we already covered in one of the leaked videos, but now we have the official spoiler for it, so we're just going to go over it again really quick. A 2/2 human pilot for 2 mana, 1 white and 1, and whenever it becomes tapped, surveil 1. It's important to note that this is going to work decently well in Limited with all of the different station spacecraft. Every time you station a spacecraft with this guy, you're going to get this extra value, get to surveil, which is pretty cool. Moving on, we have Starfield Vocalist. This is one we haven't seen yet. This is a brand new rare. A 3/4 human bard for 1 blue and 3. It warps for 1 blue and 1, and for those of you that don't know what warp is yet, it means you play it from your hand, but it only stays on the battlefield until the end of your turn, and then it gets exiled. Once it's exiled, you can play it on a later turn for its full cost, the full 4 mana, sort of like an adventure creature. So they're kind of like evoke mixed with adventure. And the reason that you'd want to do that is most of these warp creatures have special abilities that trigger when they enter or when they leave the battlefield, so you can get a little bit of extra value early. But also, bear in mind, stationing spacecraft, you don't need to worry about summoning sickness when it comes to that. So if you warp a creature like this out, you can still use it to station a spacecraft before it gets exiled, which is really interesting. But the main reason that you're warping this thing into play is it has this other ability. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Absolutely an incredible line of text right there. Being able to warp it out early when you have maybe a little bit of mana left over to get some value off of the double triggers seems really awesome, especially if maybe you can set up some kind of an ability of getting things to enter without necessarily paying mana. Maybe you have planeswalkers that can fetch things, that sort of thing. Then you can get even more value off the warp. But then it just gets exiled at the end of your turn. You could play it later for the full 4, and then it just stays as a creature forever. You get this ability forever. So pretty interesting. I'm really excited to see where warp goes, what this mechanic looks like as we get deeper and deeper into the card pool. But I think this one's pretty awesome. Next up, we've got the alternate art for Starfield Vocalist, and this is something that I tracked down afterwards. This wasn't actually in the debut, but I thought it made sense to throw it in here and show you guys that they're bringing this art style back. I believe the first time they did this art style was in Duskmourn. Correct me if I'm wrong. But pretty interesting here. We have the alternate art for Starfield Vocalist. Moving on, we have Tezzeret, Cruel Captain. Now, we've already seen this card. This was one of the very first cards spoiled back when they sort of introduced us to the set. But what they didn't show us then that we have now is the alternate art for this. Tezzeret, Cruel Captain, a 4 loyalty planeswalker for 3 colorless mana. Whenever any artifact enters, that you control enters, you put a loyalty counter on it. You pay 0 loyalty to untap an artifact. If it's an artifact or creature. If it's an artifact creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can also -3 to search for any artifact that costs 1 or less. Put it into your hand. This seems crazy for older formats. You can like fetch your Black Lotus or your Mox. And then -7, you get an emblem with at the beginning of combat on your turn. You put 3 +1/+1 counters on any artifact you control. And if it's not a creature, it becomes a 0/0 robot. Much better now that we have a better idea of the mechanics of this set, because there's going to be a ton of spacecraft that are going to take forever to station into creatures and not going to give you that part of the value right away, but they do get you a whole bunch of enters the battlefield value. They usually have some kind of value they provide in the meantime right away. And then you can actually take advantage of those spacecraft by using this emblem to make them into artifact creatures long before you're able to actually station them into the artifact creatures they're meant to be, which is kind of cool. It's a little bit of extra synergy, which I really like. But we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Kav Landseeker. This is just a common, but it's a good way to show off the lander token mechanic. This is a 4/3 Kavu soldier for 1 red and 3. He has Menace, and whenever this creature enters, create a lander token, but then at the beginning of the end step on your next turn, you have to sacrifice that token. So you're kind of forced into a situation where you have to use it or lose it. You have to use it soon. Kind of reminds me of some of the exile instead of draw effects that Red's been getting. Exile cards from the top, you know, you have a limited time to play them, so it's not quite as powerful as drawing cards, but it's like Red's way of drawing cards. I kind of like this as like Red's way of ramping and mana fixing, kind of has the same feel, which is just really interesting. It's also worth noting that you don't have to actually sacrifice the lander token for what it's meant for. You could use it with like Beseech the Mirror or something to tutor something up. There's a lot of different things you could sacrifice the lander token to get value, even if you don't necessarily have the 2 mana to sack it for its intended purpose, which I think is pretty cool. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Anticausal Vestige. This is another card that leaked that I did an entire leaked video on because it looks absolutely insane. But what they didn't show us in the leak is we got a chance to see the alternate art here. And it's looking pretty crazy. There's also a version of this that uses the black border rather than the white border, but I just wanted to show you guys the alternate art here because I think it looks pretty sick. This is a 7/5 𝐿𝑑𝑟𝑎𝑐ℎ for 6 colorless mana, but it has warp for 4. And when this creature leaves the battlefield, you draw a card, put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. It's going to be super powerful. I've already talked about this. It's going to be really insane with flicker effects, because you'll get the ability and it'll come back into play and just stay forever and actually be a creature there forever, which is kind of nuts. Yeah, I can't wait to brew around this card, but let's move on. Next up, we've got another brand new one that we had no idea existed. This is Cosmogoyf, a creature elemental Lurgoyf for 2 mana in the colors of Golgari, and it has star power and 1+ star toughness. This creature's power is equal to the number of cards you own in exile, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. So we have a Goyf that cares about exile. I think this is super cool. Now I really want to build like an 𝐴 deck with Cosmogoyf, and maybe we can throw some other exile value into that deck. I think there is certainly a deck there that could be really awesome. And it's pretty easy to just exile a whole bunch of cards all at once, depending on the kind of deck that you're building and what you're slotting this into. So this could get really powerful really quick. And for only 2 mana, that's terrifying. I think this one's going to actually be really, really nuts. Like I said, I'm super excited to use it with 𝑇ℎ𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑐ℎ, but if you have any other ideas about, you know, a card you'd want to combo it with, or a certain deck archetype you'd like to use it in, definitely let me know in the comments, because I think the potential for a Goyf that cares about exile is absolutely through the roof, and I cannot wait to brew. We even have the alternate art for this Cosmogoyf, and it looks beautiful. Look at this thing. It looks amazing. I cannot wait to get my hands on this. I'm gonna brew with this. I need coffee. I need coffee so bad. I'm getting overexcited. We're gonna move on. Next up, we've got Starbreach Whale. This is a 3/5 whale with flying for 1 blue and 4. And when this creature enters, you get to surveil 2. And it also has the warp ability for 1 blue and 1. So this is just a common, so it's not going to give you an insane amount of value when you warp it early. Basically, you're just going to pay 2 mana to surveil 2, and then if you have any sort of negligible ways of using the body before it gets exiled at the end of your turn, you can get some extra value off this. Like I said before, having spacecraft on the battlefield that need to be stationed is a really good way to get extra value off these warp creatures, even these common ones that don't have as much ETB value. You know, warp it in for 2 mana, not only are you surveilling 2, but you can tap this to station 3, any of your spacecraft that you want, and you don't really lose anything because it wasn't going to be able to attack anyway, and it wasn't going to stick around long enough to be able to block, which I think is really cool. But don't forget, that's not all it does. It's just like an adventure where after it warps and gets exiled, it still sits there in exile. You can play it later on, get the 3/5 flyer, and get to surveil 2 again, which I think is great. It also might be a cool way to dodge discard, although I might be getting ahead of myself there. I don't know how much that's actually going to matter. But I do like this warp mechanic, being a twist on sort of like evoke and adventure at the same time, and then having ways in the set that are built into the set to take advantage of creatures that might not be able to use their power effectively because they were warped in, like the, you know, the station mechanic. I think all of it is designed very cleverly, and I'm pretty excited to play with these cards. We're gonna move on. Next, we have the Seriema. This is another one that was spoiled when they first showed us this set. They first announced the set, so we already kind of saw this, but I'll just go over it again quickly for any of you that haven't seen this yet. This is a 5/5 legendary artifact spacecraft for 2 white and 1. When it enters, you search your library for a legendary creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then when it gets stationed up to 7+ charge counters, it turns into that 5/5 with flying, and other tapped legendary creatures you control have indestructible. This is a good example of, even though it doesn't get you value as a body right away, and it might take you a while to get there, it still gives you that initial value. It's a tutor that finds whatever legendary you need. It might even be the legendary that you use to station this thing up to 7 charge counters. And then it's got this value, this eventual value that it's going to hit no matter what at some point, as long as you stay alive long enough. But you also get the legendary creature that you searched up, and you can do whatever you need to with that in the meantime. It's also worth pointing out that it triggers on enters. So again, I feel like a broken record. I keep talking about Flicker decks in pretty much every spoiler video I've done so far, but it really looks like Flicker is going to be absolutely insane in this set. Every time you flicker the Seriema, you're going to get to search for another legendary creature. Granted, you'll lose the charge counters, so it's kind of like a pick your poison, one or the other. If you want to station this guy up and use it as a creature, you're probably going to not want to build it into a deck that's trying to go that direction with it. But having more options, more versatility to these cards, I think is pretty cool. Next up, we've got 𝔼𝑍𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛𝑐𝑒 Void Altar. This is a land planet. This is another one that we already saw leaked in an earlier video, but we have the official card here. We haven't seen this art for it yet, and it's looking pretty cool. It enters tapped, it taps for a black mana, and it has the station ability, but it doesn't become a creature once it gets to the full amount of charge counters it needs, which in this case is 12+. Instead, it just turns on an ability, and that ability allows it to pay 2 mana, tap it, pay 2 life, sacrifice a creature, and then draw cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power, but activate only as a sorcery. I pointed this out when it was first leaked, but this ability is going to be super good in maybe like a 𝐼𝐻𝐿 synthesizer deck, where you're just making these huge tokens. You can tap those tokens to then station this, and then sacrifice a token that's tapped, that's not going to be able to block or attack anyway, to be the thing that you sack to draw the cards. So there's ways that you can line this up to get even more efficiency out of it, which I think is really cool. You can also use cards that bring creatures back from the graveyard or create tokens or whatever, with the stipulation that they get sacrificed at end of turn. Since they're going to get sacrificed at end of turn anyway, you can just use those creatures to station this thing, and then after it's stationed, sacrifice one of them to draw the cards, because it's going to get sacrificed anyway. So I do think there are some really cool ways to synergize with an ability like this. A lot to explore when this set drops for sure. There will be a lot of brewing, 100%. But next up, we've got Galactic Wayfarer, a 3/3 human scout for 1 green and 2, and when it enters, you create a lander token. Very simple and to the point, a 3/3 body that trades decently well at 3 mana, but it also gives you a lander token. And as you can see, unlike the red card that we saw, you don't have some kind of a stipulation on this guy where you have to sacrifice it, you know, next turn or whatever the case may be. It's just there forever, waiting for when you're ready to use it, which is pretty cool. Again, this is just a common. It's not really anything to write home about, but it is cool to get some insight into the direction that they're going with some of these mechanics for limited. Let's move on. Next up, we've got Starfield Shepherd. This is another one that we actually already covered in one of the leaked videos, but they showed it off officially here, and it's absolutely worth just going over again quickly. A 3/2 flying angel for 2 white and 3. When it enters, you search your library for a basic plains card or a creature card with mana value 1 or less. Reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. And then it warps for just 1 white and 1. So you warp it out for 2, you find a plains or a small creature, then it goes into exile. You could even station with it before it goes into exile. Then later you pay 5, you get your 3/2 flyer forever, and find another plains or cheap creature. That's just a ton of value. That's like an automatic 3 for 1. And granted, you have to pay for the thing twice, 2 to warp it and 5 to play it later. But at the same time, it's still one card that got you sort of 3 for 1 value, which I kind of love. And there are a ton of crazy creatures that you can find with this that are better than you might think. Like any of the creatures that cost X or 1 mana plus X could be really huge. They could be things that scale with the game and be super relevant, but you can still search them up with the Starfield Shepherd. So I do think there's a lot of value to be had here and a lot of potential. And I'm really excited to hear about how you guys want to use a card like this, because I think this is probably going to be one of the better uncommons we see in the set. I think this thing is just poised to be an absolute powerhouse, even in constructed. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Tragic Trajectory, a sorcery for 1 black mana. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and then it has the Void ability, so it instead gets -10/-10 until end of turn if a non-land permanent left the battlefield, or if a spell was warped this turn. I think this is sort of meant to be the replacement for Cutdown. Cutdown's rotating out when this set rotates in, and this is a 1 mana removal spell. Being a sorcery is one hell of a downside. Obviously, that's nowhere near as good as instant speed Cutdown, but the potential to like literally kill anything that's huge, even indestructible stuff, because it's -X/-X, seems kind of nuts, and it's actually a lot easier to trigger that void than you would think. Note that it doesn't say a non-land permanent you control, or a spell that you control. Even if your opponent loses something, or warps the spell, or whatever, it's going to turn on your void and allow you to play Tragic Trajectory and give something -10/-10, which I think is crazy. It works a lot better in like sacrifice decks, because you have much more consistently have the ability to turn on that void by sacrificing something of your own. It's going to work really well in like warp decks, if such a deck will really be a thing, which we haven't seen enough cards to know for sure. But I do think there's a lot of versatility into how this card can be used, how that void can be turned on, and I do think this is one of those cards that is going to seem not as good at first, still really good, but I think once the entire set is spoiled, it's going to look even better once we have a bunch of cards that this can synergize with. Even the dog's excited about it. I heard him. I heard you! Let's move on. Next up, we saw a whole bunch of lands coming to the bonus sheet. I believe the bonus sheet is called Stellar Sites. These won't be standard legal, but it will still be crazy to get your hands on these cards. First of all, we have Celestial Colonnade, a land that enters tapped, taps for white or blue mana, and you can pay 5 mana until end of turn. It becomes a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature with flying and vigilance. It's still a land. Next up, we've got Gemstone Caverns. This art style, these frames, they look absolutely beautiful. I love having the entire top of the card be art, and then having the frame be kind of like that galaxy map sort of style, that golden galaxy map around the edges. It just looks really cool to me. But Gemstone Caverns is a legendary land. If it's in your opening hand and you're not the starting player, you may begin the game with Gemstone Caverns on the battlefield with a luck counter on it. If you do, you exile a card from your hand, and then you can tap it for a colorless mana, and if it has a luck counter on it, instead add a mana of any color. So pretty cool. Sometimes you'll get this to color fix, but not always. Next up, we've got High Market, another colorless land. Tap it for a colorless mana, or tap it and sacrifice a creature to gain a life. And then we also have Mana Confluence, a land that you can tap and pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color. Basically a City of Brass, except without the ability to make colorless mana without paying life. Still an interesting card. Let's move on. Nesting Grounds, another colorless land that taps for 1 colorless mana, and you can pay 1, tap it, move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent, activate only as a sorcery. This one is especially interesting because of the station mechanic being in this set with spacecraft and the like. Being able to move those charge counters around to maybe hit your threshold and station a creature seems really, really cool. And this is one that I hope to open in Limited. I think it would be really, really fun. Next up, we've got another new card. This is Terra Symbiosis, an enchantment for 1 green and 2. Whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, you may draw that many cards. Do this only once each turn. Still a ton of potential for drawing a ton of cards in just the right deck. We already have Saz's Chocobo that gets a counter every turn. We've got Jenova that's shooting counters onto things. We've got a lot of support up to and including the Final Fantasy set for like a +1/+1 counter sort of deck. In fact, one of my favorite decks that I put up a deck tech for recently was my Jenova deck, Golgari Jenova, and I'm probably going to be messing around with 3-color variants of that because I think that deck is sick. And this card could absolutely make the cut in there. Being able to just draw a bunch of cards by putting a bunch of counters on something every turn seems awesome. And if your deck is already poised to do that, this is just sheer value. The only real downside is the fact that maybe it does nothing the turn you play it. If you drop this on 3 for all 3 of your mana, and you don't have a way to put counters on stuff, it is very much a dead card. So you gotta be careful with how you build around it, but I still think there is an insane amount of value here. I'm actually curious what you guys think of this card, so let me know in the comments if you think it's crazy, or if you think it's just too slow and not good enough. I'm super curious. But next up, we've got Archenemy's Charm. This is another one that we already saw leaked and we covered in one of the leaked videos. An instant for 3 black mana. You choose one. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Return 1 or 2 target creatures and or planeswalker cards from your graveyard to your hand. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. It gains lifelink until end of turn. This card is nuts, man. Granted, it's a little bit more costly than what you would normally want for removal in your black deck. Right? The status quo for removal, even instant speed removal right now, is 2 mana. That being said, it's still instant speed, it does exile, and it can hit planeswalkers. So you can kind of start to justify it there, but when you take into account all of the versatility of being able to get things back out of the graveyard, put counters on stuff, gain lifelink, this card really starts to feel almost necessary in black heavy decks. There's just so many ways you can run it. Like, even if you're in a creatureless deck, say you're running like a Super Friends deck, right? And you're up against a very creature light deck because they're running a control deck. You can't use this to exile a creature. It feels like it might be a dead card. Your other removal might be a dead card. This could get you 2 of your planeswalkers back from the graveyard because they got no creatures to kill, and you're a Super Friends deck, and they've managed to kill a couple of your planeswalkers as you were curving out. Like I said, just a lot of versatility in how you can use this, and all of it's at instant speed. So I think that makes this card like way better than it looks on the surface. I think it's actually going to be a staple in Standard, especially in mono black decks. The 3 black mana is a little bit tricky to come up with, but we do have the Shocklands coming back. So even in 2-color decks, I think this is going to be a pretty viable option. Let me know what you think in the comments, but let's move on. Next up, we've got another new card. This is Quantum Riddler. A 4/6 Sphinx with flying for 2 blue and 3. When this creature enters, you draw a card, and as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, if you would draw 1 or more cards, you draw that many cards +1 instead. It also warps for just 1 blue and 1. So you could potentially warp this out for 2 mana and only have 1 other card left in your hand and immediately draw 2 for 2 mana. And also have a 4-power creature until end of turn that can station your spacecraft or crew your vehicles or whatever the case may be. Then it gets exiled. Later on, when you have 5 mana, you pay the 5 mana, and if you only had 1 or less cards in your hand, then you'll draw 2 cards again. Not only that, it works for more than just when you play this to draw a card. As long as it's just on the battlefield, every single time you draw a card, you draw 2 instead, as long as you're keeping your hand size down. There's just so many ways to take advantage of this, and it being in a set with warp seems really great, because if you're just warping a ton of creatures, you could theoretically have a whole bunch of stuff in exile that you can still play, so it feels like you have a really big hand, but technically not have a big hand. You know, have 0 or 1 cards in your hand so that you're always able to use this ability every time you draw. And I'm super curious if that's actually an archetype that will be successful. We're definitely going to try to build that because I think it's really, really interesting to just tuck all your warped creatures away in exile, save them for a rainy day, and then try to get value off them not actually being in your hand, whether it's with this card or just, you know, sort of being a way to fight back against discard decks or anything like that. I think it's just a really cool concept. If you have ideas about how to make that sort of deck work, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you have any cards we could combo this with, because I do think there's a ton of potential here. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Nova 𝐿𝐻𝐾𝐒. This is a 4/5 dragon with flying and haste for 2 red and 3. This is another one that we saw in the leaks, but we haven't seen this art style, and it actually looks really cool. So 4/5 flying haste for 5, but it warps in for 3, and when it enters, it deals 1 damage to target creature an opponent controls. So theoretically, you warp this in for 3, you smack them in the face for 4 with haste, and deal a damage to a creature, maybe ping something like their Llanowar Elf and kill it, and then it gets exiled, and it can do it all over again later. You pay the 5, you ping another Llanowar Elf, you swing in for 4 in the air, and then the creature's going to stay forever. You can also use this with flicker effects to just warp it in, flicker it, do 2 pings in the same turn to kill something that has 2 toughness. I think there's a lot of different ways you can use a card like this to get maximum value, and I'm really excited to just see if this card can be good enough. Part of me thinks that it can. There's another part of me that thinks it's just a little too slow and a little bit too small of an ETB ability to truly be relevant. But I think we're going to have to try to build around it and test it to really see where it lands. I could see this card going either way, but either way I think it's pretty cool. Next up, we've got Raggost Deft Gastronaut, a 2/2 legendary lobster citizen. So this is the lobster citizen that Maro teased us with last week. 2 mana in the colors of Boros. Artifacts you control are foods in addition to their other types, and they have pay 2 mana, tap, sack this artifact to gain 3 life. So literally all of your artifacts become foods. Seems kind of crazy in an artifact deck, but it gets better. Pay 1 mana, tap, sacrifice a food. Raggost deals 3 damage to each opponent. So all of your foods can also potentially just be burned to their head. But then it gets even better, because at the beginning of each end step, if you gained life this turn, you untap Raggost. That's every end step, that's not just your end step. So, even if you have no other way to gain life, you can sack one of your artifacts, because it's now a food, to gain the 3 life. Sack another one to this other ability to do 3 damage to every opponent, and then at your end step, it's going to untap because you gain 3 life from the first food. During your opponent's turn, you do the same thing. You know, you don't even have to sack a food to gain life, actually, during your opponent's turn, because you're just going to untap on your turn anyway. So, I mean, maybe you want to anyway, because you could use this ability at instant speed to still do another 3 damage, even before your untap step, and then be ready to go on your turn as well. You could do 9 damage every turn cycle if you sequence things correctly. And then if you have other ways of gaining life that don't require you to spend 2 mana every single time, it could be a lot easier. Maybe you're just literally paying 1, sacking an artifact, dealing 3, and just untapping without having to spend any extra mana because there's something on the board that's feeding you just a little bit of negligible life every turn for no mana. I can't think of a card off the top of my head that I would pair this with in order to achieve that, but I'm sure some of you guys out there have ideas, so let me know in the comments. I think the potential for a card like this is kind of nuts. Even just the untap ability seems kind of nuts. If you have any other value, anything you can use with this, oh, that just made me realize you could pair this with Soul Cauldron. Not only could you give its ability to sack foods to deal 3 damage to whatever you want, but more importantly, you could give other abilities to this if you exile other creatures with the Soul Cauldron, and then take advantage of the fact that this untaps at the end of every turn if you gained life, so that you can reuse whatever abilities you're giving to it with the Soul Cauldron. I need to think about this a lot longer before I know the best use for that, but that's gotta be a deck, right? That's gotta be a thing. That just seems awesome. So if you have ideas about how to make this work, let me know in the comments. I think this guy has a ton of untapped potential. Pun intended. Next up, we've got, oh, right, the alt art. I found the alt art for him. It looks pretty cool. Just wanted to make sure you guys saw the alt art. But we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Astelli Reclaimer, a 5/4 Angel Warrior with flying for 2 white and 3. And when it enters, you return target non-creature, non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this creature. But it also has Warp for 1 white and 2. So you could play this earlier in the game for 3 mana, put a 5/4 flyer onto the battlefield for just that turn, but get any 3-drop that's a non-creature permanent back from your graveyard. Get back your 𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿 Synthesizer, get back your Caretaker's Talent, whatever the case may be. That alone seems kind of crazy. But if you get back a 3-drop Spacecraft, you could then also tap the Astelli Reclaimer to station 5 charge counters onto that Spacecraft before the Reclaimer leaves, and then later in the game, you play this again for 5 mana, and you get to bring a non-creature permanent that costs 5 or less back from the graveyard. There's so much potential value in this card. I have no idea how I want to use it. There are so many, there's so many ways you can use this. You guys are going to have to let me know in the comments. The potential for this card is absolutely through the roof. Like I said, 𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿 Synthesizer, Caretaker's Talent. There's just, man, Standard's about to be crazy. This card seems like it has insane potential. I literally cannot think of the best way to use it right now, but there will be some pretty gnarly... There's going to be some pretty gnarly options. I know it. Someone out there is going to think of something I'm not thinking of, and it's going to be gross. If that's you, put it in the comments. But let's move on. Next up, we've got Elegy Acolyte. This is another card that we saw leaked that we already covered in a prior video, but we never saw the alternate art like we're seeing today. This is a 4/4 life-linking human cleric for 2 black and 2. So 4 total mana for a 4/4 lifelinker, which is not really on rate in today's standard, which kind of sounds crazy if you think about how pushed this would have been in old Magic. Juzam Jin. Anyway, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose a life. So it's kind of like a Phyrexian Arena tacked on, as long as you can just get through for damage. It's also worth pointing out that in a multiplayer game like Commander, if you deal damage to multiple players, you'll get to draw multiple cards. That being said, if you're dealing a bunch of damage to one player, it doesn't matter how many creatures hit them, you're still only drawing 1 card. But it also has this void ability. At the beginning of your end step, if a non-land permanent left the battlefield this turn, or a spell was warped, you make a 2/2. This is actually kind of awesome. This card just does everything. It's a 4/4 lifelinker that's going to be gaining back the life you're losing from drawing cards to the Phyrexian Arena effect. You're going to be going wide with robots so that you can just alpha strike in and make sure you get through with something so that you trigger the card draw. And all you need to do in order to trigger that void ability is something needs to leave the battlefield, or you need to warp something. And again, you don't need to have something of yours leave the battlefield. You could play this in a control deck and just kill one of their creatures and then trigger the void and get a 2/2. This could be your win condition. Even if you have no other creatures in the deck, you could theoretically, I don't think that would be the best way to build with this, but theoretically, you could play this in a control deck with no other win conditions, and you could just start nuking all their stuff and just making a 2/2 every single turn and eventually have this huge wide board while also drawing extra cards. There's a lot of potential in this. That being said, I think most people are going to look at the stat line and look at all of the red tape you have to jump through to trigger its abilities and think that maybe it's not quite worth it. This is one of those cards that, if I'm a betting man, I think is probably going to be a little bit more of a sleeper than most people realize. I think people are going to think it's fine. But I think a card like this, when you actually see it in action and it actually curves out, I think it ends up being a little bit better than what people think it would be. And we're going to have to wait and see once the set finally drops on Arena, but I think it has a lot of potential. Next up, we've got Sammy Wildcat Captain. This is a mythic, a 4/4 legendary human artificer rogue for 6 mana in the colors of Boros. It has double strike, it has vigilance, and spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. How crazy is that? Like, even if you're not cheating this into play, let's be honest, you're gonna cheat this into play. But even if you're not cheating this into play, you just play this as your top end in an artifact deck, and you're slowly curving out Simulacrum Synthesizer, whatever, you're playing Jeskai, then all of a sudden you just slam this and your whole hand just empties. Your whole hand. Not to mention it works decently well with lander stuff, because even if the thing creating a lander token isn't an artifact itself, it's still going to get affinity off of the lander tokens you've already created, and you're going to be able to play it and get more lander tokens to get more affinity. And then obviously there's the spacecraft. There's a ton of spacecraft in the set, so you can use those to power up the affinity, but you can also use those as huge top-end hits, some of the expensive ones, to just jam out onto the battlefield. I think what I like about this guy the most is, even if you've only got 6 mana, if you're playing a bunch of colorless stuff, oh man. Is the Ugin colorless deck about to be Boros? Do you just play everything colorless plus this guy? Right? Turn 5 or something with a little bit of ramp, you slam it, and then immediately everything in your hand just goes to 0 cost if it's colorless. You can just play it, just play everything in your hand. That seems crazy. I bet there's going to be a combo deck. I bet you play out all the rest of your artifacts in your hand for nothing, go super, super, super wide with artifacts, the same turn that you play Sammy, and then you have like one spell in your hand that's like an X spell, and use your last 1 or 2 mana to pay for it, and then dump like 15 into X or whatever, because everything else is on the battlefield and is an artifact fueling your affinity, and you just play some really crazy, ridiculous spell. I bet there's going to be a combo deck. If you have ideas about how to make that happen, let me know in the comments. I know I say that a lot, but I'm just really excited about this set, and I'm trying to get these cards out to you ASAP, so I haven't had a ton of time to actually think over all of the different ways to use them, but I think this card is bananas. I think there could be a combo deck with this, and there could also just be a really good artifact mid-range deck, like Simulacrum Synthesizer deck, that might still want to run this just for even more value. Either way, there's a ton of potential. Let me know how you're feeling in the comments. Next up, we've got Mutinous Massacre. This is a sorcery in the colors of Rakdos for a whopping 7 mana, which is a lot, and it's a sorcery, it's not instant speed. You choose odd or even, destroy each creature with mana value of the chosen quality. Then, you gain control of all creatures until end of turn, untap them, they gain haste until end of turn. This seems kind of nuts. Like, you get to steal half their board. I think when you play this, you choose whether you want to steal odd or even first, before you decide what you want to choose in order to destroy the other one. So you got to kind of work backwards in your own head. You steal all their best creatures, you kill everything else so that it can't block them, and then you swing in and just win. I think a lot of times this just wins the game, right? Yeah, I think a lot of times this just wins the game. It's also a really cool way of getting around like indestructible creatures. Like if they've got a Zodiark on their side and it's indestructible, Zodiark costs 5 mana. So you name even, right? No, you name odd. No, you name even, destroy everything with even mana cost, which won't be Zodiark, and then gain control of all the odds, which would be Zodiark, the thing that you couldn't destroy, and every other odd, and then just swing and win. That seems fine. There's also there's even more opportunity to get value off of this card in this set because of the station mechanic. So even if you can't swing and win, you might want to just take all their creatures and use them, tap them all down to station all of your spacecraft. That's another way you could use it. I think it's probably better to just go for the win. I think if there is a deck in Standard that uses this card, it probably just plays this as a win condition, right? The only downside is if you're up against a control deck that doesn't have a lot of creatures, this isn't really going to do a whole lot for you. But I mean, that's always the case with board wipes, right? You always have the risk of that sort of a scenario popping up. I think there is a lot you can do with this. It's really cool. It's probably too expensive, and if it does see play, it's definitely just going to be like the win condition that you power ramp up to and just win out of nowhere by killing all their blockers, taking the rest, and swinging for lethal. That's my guess. If you have ideas about how to use this thing, let me know in the comments. But that's what I'm going with for now. We also have the alternate art for Mutinous Massacre. which looks pretty rad, I gotta say. I wanted to make sure I showed you guys the alternate art because I think I like the original better, but it's still a really cool art type. Let's move on. Next up, we've got Exalted Sunborn. This is another mythic. A 4/5 angel wizard for 5 mana, 2 white and 3. It has flying, it has lifelink. If one or more tokens will be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead, and it warps for just 2 mana. Kind of interesting, right? If you warp this out after you already have an 𝔼𝑍𝑏𝑵, you uptick your 𝔼𝑍𝑏𝑵 and you get 4 creature tokens instead of 2, which is kind of nuts. Using this in the same deck as 𝔼𝑍𝑏𝑵 and those being your 2 5-drops seems kind of nuts, but being able to warp this out earlier in the game, or maybe it is turn 5 but you want to play something else as well, something that makes tokens maybe, also seems kind of good. The warp just honestly adds a ton of versatility to the card. Like, you're going to get to play it for 5 mana no matter what. You're going to get this big angel that's flying, that's lifelink, that's doubling your tokens no matter what once you hardcast it. But having maybe an opportunity a little bit earlier in the game to just warp this in and take advantage of it, get a few extra tokens, maybe even tap it to station a spacecraft or something like that, seems really cool. I think it is kind of weird that we're getting a card like this so soon after getting 𝔼𝑍𝑏𝑵, which is the same mana cost and does kind of the same thing but a little bit more. But like I said, the warp adds a little something into the mix that we're going to have to test out to see just how good the card is. But yeah, there's a lot of token support. Token decks are about to be crazy. They're already crazy, but I think they're going to be even crazier. I am very grateful that Cori Steelcutter is banned in Standard. Thank you. We also got the alternate art for this card, and it's looking glorious. I absolutely love this art style. I think this one in particular was the reason that I wanted to track down some of these alternate arts and show you guys, because this just looks amazing to me. It looks cosmic, but it also looks fantasy at the same time, and I really like it. But next up, we've got Uthros, Titanic God Core. Tolarian Academy is back in Standard. Not really, but close enough. This is a land planet that enters tapped. It taps for 1 blue mana. It has the station ability, and when it gets to 12+ counters, it turns into a Tolarian Academy. We already had the green mythic land that did the same thing for Gaia's Cradle. Now we have a mythic stationing land that becomes Tolarian Academy. That's insane. I'm going to go out on a limb and say artifact decks are going to be absolutely bonkers. They're going to be one of the tier 1 meta decks, and they're absolutely going to use Uthros here. Having essentially Tolarian Academy back in Standard, even if it does take 12+ charge counters, that just seems crazy. Am I the only one that thinks this is crazy? There's going to be a way to break this. There's going to be a way to get around that feeling like it's going to take too long. You know there is. And it's going to be absolutely gross. All of these artifact synergies that we're seeing, there are going to be some gross decks. You know there are going to be. I'm going to think long and hard about how to brew the most insane artifact decks I can come up with, because there's so much support. There's so much craziness coming. This card is nuts. Tolarian Academy is back in Standard. I can't believe it. I mean, it's not Tolarian Academy. It's not. You have to jump through a lot of hoops to get there. But it might as well be. We're going to figure it out. Someone's going to figure out how to jump through those hoops efficiently. It's going to happen. Absolutely. Maybe it's the affinity for artifacts guy that we saw. You know, lets you get a whole bunch of artifact creatures out. Boom, 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 boom. And then they all station this. You make a ton of mana. And then that one spell we were talking about that was already getting a ton of reduced cost. Now you have a ton of mana to pump into it too? Yeah, that could be a thing. And then you like Fireball for the win or whatever. Whatever X spell's going to get the job done. Yeah. Not only do you reduce the cost of the spell by however many artifacts you have out, you then make that same amount of mana to pump into the spell as well. That's crazy. Someone's going to make that. We got to make that, right? We're going to make a lot of decks with this card. There's a lot to explore here. This card's broken. And the alternate art looks pretty cool. This is that art style that we saw earlier for the Shocklands, where it looks like you're looking out the porthole in your spacecraft, you know, seeing the lands beyond a planet that you just landed on. And it looks pretty rad. But next up is Sliver Overlord. This is one of the special guest cards, and this is one of the cards that's going to allow us to get slivers in limited at least, when we're using this set. And pretty nuts, man. 7/7, pay 3 mana to gain control of target sliver. Pay 3 mana, search your library for a sliver card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. It costs a WUBRG, so one of each color, 5 total mana. This thing's going to be nuts and limited. If you pull this, pack 1, pick 1, do you actually try to go 5 color? We have the lander tokens, right? This is probably one of the reasons we have the lander tokens. Or maybe the lander tokens were one of the reasons they actually considered putting this card in as a special guest. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? But I think lander tokens are going to be crazy. The fact that kind of all the colors are going to get access to basic land ramp that was normally only green seems nuts. Or at least I assume all the colors will get it. If red's getting it, I feel like everybody's going to get it. This card might be that much more usable in limited than we realize. And we can make a bunch of those sliver tokens, and that'll be super fun. But I'm holding out hope there's even more sliver cards coming. Whether they're actual sliver cards or just other ways to create sliver tokens. In fact, I think I did see another card spoiled just before I started filming this that we're going to cover in the next video. So stick around for that. That's coming later tonight. As soon as they stop spoiling cards for the day, we're going to make another video that is everything that was spoiled on day 1 that wasn't a part of the debut. This video is covering the debut, so stick around for that. But Slivers, man, I can only dream. But next up, we've got our last card of the day, and that's the Endstone. This was shown off briefly in the debut, but you only got like a weird sideways glance at it. Here we have the actual full card. 7 mana for a legendary artifact. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, draw a card. Notice it doesn't say once per turn. Almost anything that has this ability, an ability this good for drawing cards, is always limited to once per turn. This isn't, because it's legendary and because it's 7 mana. But maybe if you're playing that guy that has affinity for artifacts, this guy's super easy to get out. Either way, drawing cards off literally just playing a land seems crazy, and it's every land and every spell. Literally everything that comes out of your hand. Every single thing that comes out of your hand. In fact, if you're using something that lets you look at the top card of your library and play things from the top, it'll let you draw cards for playing stuff off your library too. So it could be even more than just playing everything from your land. But every single thing you play just draws you a card. Everything's a cantrip. That's already crazy. But then it has this other ability. At the beginning of your end step, your life total becomes half your starting life total rounded up. Now, sometimes this is going to be a downside. It's going to 11 in a 2-player game. In Commander, it's different. But in a normal one-on-one game of Magic, in Standard, in Limited, it's going to put your life at 11. Sometimes that's a bad thing, because if you're still at 20, you're losing a bunch of life, right? But sometimes this can be an upside. If you're up against an aggro deck, and you've been trying to ramp out to get your Endstone out, and they got you down to like 4 life, and then you jam your Endstone, not only are you drawing cards every time you play a land and cast a spell, but you're going back up to 11 at end of turn. And then an aggro deck has to do 11 damage in the same turn in order to kill you. Otherwise, you keep going back up to 11 every single time, which is awesome. So depending on how you use this, I think a lot of times that second ability can be an upside. And I'm really digging it, especially with all of the ways in which they nerfed aggro and Standard recently with the bans. I think the power of aggro has come down just enough that it's going to be really hard for them to do 11 damage in one turn. Previously, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. But I think it's going to be a little trickier for them to do something like that. So if you're going back up to 11 every turn, that seems awesome. If you're playing a little bit of life gain on top of that, you like go back up to 11, and then like before they swing, you like gain 3 life from a spell, like a lightning helix or something, and you're up to 14, and then they hit you for damage, and it brings you just barely below 11. Now it feels like they literally wasted their turn. Like if they can't finish you off and kill you, you just go back up to 11 on your turn. I think it's really, really cool. It could be win more. 7 mana is a lot. Legendary means you can only have 1. It could be very win more. but we've also seen a ton of ramp already in this set, especially a couple of the cards that leaked that we covered in other videos, which if you haven't seen those other videos, you definitely have to check them out. Like I said, I've got the entire playlist linked in the description, in the comments. There's some crazy cards. There's a couple artifacts in there that are really, really good that will ramp this thing to high hell and get it out way earlier. And that could be what this card needs. Or maybe the affinity guy. I think there's a lot of different directions you could go. But even the alternate art looks amazing for this card. Look at this art. He's just out in the middle of nowhere with this thing. I love it. Everything about this card is nuts. Like I said, it could be win more. It might be a bit much. But it could end up being just right. If artifacts end up being as crazy as I think they might, this thing could just be nuts. Or it could be a whiff. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm curious if you agree with me or if this card is trash. It's really hard to know for sure right now. I could see it going either way, but I have a feeling with all of the artifact synergy we've seen that this card's going to be nuts. But that's going to do it for this video. Like I said, this is not the last video coming out today, guys, so check back in just a few hours. I'm going to have all of the rest of the day one spoilers. Clearly, I need coffee. Ugh. Tripping over my words. I'm going to have all of the rest of the day one spoilers in another video, have everything wrapped up for you guys so you don't miss a single card that was shown off. And I'm super excited to get that stuff out to you. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe so you never miss any of that content. And please like the video so I can get it out to more people so the channel can grow. Those of you that have been liking every video, I see you. I notice, and it means a lot, so thank you. Let me know in the comments if that's you, because I do appreciate it more than I can possibly express with words. And I mean that. I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. This channel has been a lot of work for a long time, with very little results for a long time, and people are finally starting to take notice and care, and it really means the world to me. You guys have no idea how much it means to me, so thank you so much. Look forward to the next one. Catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn, because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. More spoilers on the way. Let's do it. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Wonders of the First. Wonders of the First is a brand new collectible card game similar to games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, featuring a unique action-based resource economy that helps avoid pitfalls like mana flood or mana screw, and a battlefield containing multiple realms that unlock over time as you fight for control of the stones. The first 400 card set is called Existence, and they've even partnered with Star City Games to host their competitive play tour at every single SCG-Con event starting in August. The game contains alternate borderless art variants, as well as highly sought after limited edition numbered prints, culminating in a one-of-one stone foil. And the best part is that the developers have a community-first approach, with a card database and deck builder available via Cardio, as well as a version of the game available on Tabletop Simulator, all for free. For more information, be sure to check out wondersccg.com today. That's wondersccg.com. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.